My beloved child. Do not scroll past this moment. There is a reason your eyes landed here today. Out of all the messages, all the voices, all the distractions surrounding you, something deeper guided you to these words. You may not understand it yet. You may not even know why your heart suddenly feels different as you read this. But heaven has been arranging certain pieces behind the curtain, and tonight a hidden conversation has reached a turning point. Something important has just happened. A decision has been made. And strangely enough, it did not come from the person you have been thinking about. It came from their mother. Before you dismiss this as coincidence, listen carefully. For a long time, there have been unseen currents moving beneath the surface of your story. Things were being discussed when your name was not in the room. Questions were being asked when you had no idea anyone was speaking about you. Observations were being made from a distance while you continued living your life, unaware that your presence had already begun affecting people you had never even met. What I am about to reveal is not what you expect. Because this was never simply about whether your soulmate cared. It was never simply about attraction. It was never simply about timing. There was another heart involved in this story. Another mind watching everything. Another soul trying to understand why you appeared so suddenly within the life of someone they love. And that soul belonged to your soulmate's mother. For months, perhaps longer than you realize, she has been carrying silent thoughts about you. Not always positive. Not always negative. But powerful. Questions lingered inside her. Who are you? Why has her child changed since meeting you? Why does your name keep appearing in conversations? Why does your energy continue showing up even during moments when nobody intends to discuss you? These questions grew. Quietly. Steadily. Like ripples spreading across still water. And while you knew nothing about it, something remarkable was happening. Every observation she made was forming a picture. Every story she heard was adding another piece. Every emotion she witnessed inside her child was becoming evidence. At first, she tried to ignore it. Many parents do. They convince themselves that emotions will fade. They tell themselves that attachment is temporary. They assume feelings will disappear after enough time passes. But this situation refused to disappear. The more she observed, the more difficult it became to deny. Your presence remained. Not physically. Energetically. Emotionally. Spiritually. There were moments when she noticed her child smiling for reasons that could not be explained. Moments when a certain brightness entered the room after a message arrived. Moments when silence itself seemed to contain your name even when nobody spoke it aloud. And this created something unexpected. Curiosity. Curiosity became observation. Observation became reflection. Reflection became concern. And concern eventually transformed into something much deeper. Understanding. But my beloved child, understanding did not arrive all at once. No. It arrived through a series of events that seemed insignificant at the time. A comment here. A reaction there. A memory shared unexpectedly. A detail repeated one too many times. One evening she remembered something her child had said weeks earlier. Another day she noticed a change in behavior that she could not explain. Then another puzzle piece appeared. And another. And another. Until eventually she found herself sitting alone, replaying everything she had seen. That was the night the energy shifted. Not outwardly. Internally. Because for the first time, she stopped asking whether you mattered. Instead, she began asking why you mattered so much. There is a difference. A very important difference. One question looks for flaws. The other looks for truth. And once a person begins seeking truth, they rarely remain the same. You see, many people judge before they understand. Many people resist before they listen. Many people decide before they observe. But she reached a moment where observation became impossible to ignore. Something about you kept returning to her thoughts. Something about your connection kept resurfacing. Something about the way her child spoke of you refused to fit into ordinary explanations. And although she never announced it publicly, she started paying attention more carefully than ever before. What happened next surprised even her. Because the more honestly she looked, the more she discovered something she had not expected to find. Consistency. Not perfection. Consistency. The stories matched. The emotions matched. The impact matched. The changes she witnessed could no longer be explained away as temporary excitement. There was something deeper at work. Something real. Something that had quietly taken root. And that realization unsettled her. Not because it was bad. Because it was significant. Significance carries weight. And weight demands decisions. That is where the story becomes interesting. Because a mother can ignore many things. But she cannot ignore what affects her child's heart. Especially when the effect becomes impossible to deny. Days passed. Then weeks. The observations continued. The evidence continued. And slowly a private internal battle began. One side of her wanted certainty. The other side recognized destiny often arrives without certainty. One side wanted guarantees. The other side understood life rarely offers them. One side wanted control. The other side sensed control was slipping away. The struggle was exhausting. Yet every time she attempted to dismiss the connection, something happened that brought her attention back to it. Almost as if heaven itself refused to let the matter rest. Have you ever experienced that feeling? When something keeps returning? When a thought keeps appearing? When a situation repeatedly enters your path no matter how many times you set it aside? That is exactly what happened. And eventually she stopped resisting. She became willing to consider possibilities she had never considered before. That willingness changed everything. Because once the heart opens even slightly, truth finds room to enter. One afternoon, during a conversation that seemed completely ordinary, a single sentence was spoken. Just one sentence. Yet it struck her harder than anyone realized. The room moved on. The discussion changed. People forgot about it. But she did not. The words stayed with her. Echoing. Repeating. Following her into the evening. Following her into the next day. Following her into moments of silence. The sentence was simple. But it carried a truth she could not escape. For the first time she saw the situation from a perspective she had never considered before. And suddenly pieces began fitting together. Things that once seemed confusing now made sense. Things that once appeared random now looked connected. Things that once seemed small now felt meaningful. My beloved child, there are moments when a person's understanding changes forever. This was one of those moments. Yet even then, the final decision had not been made. No. The most important part was still ahead. Because understanding creates a doorway. Walking through it requires courage. And courage was about to be tested. That night she sat quietly. The house was calm. The world outside continued as usual. But inside her thoughts, a storm was unfolding. Memories surfaced. Conversations resurfaced. Expressions resurfaced. Questions resurfaced. Everything she had witnessed began replaying like scenes from a film. One by one. Piece by piece. Until finally she arrived at a conclusion she had been avoiding. And when she reached it, she could no longer turn away. She realized your influence was real. She realized your presence mattered. She realized your connection had already changed things. And perhaps most importantly, she realized this story was not ending. It was only beginning. Now pay close attention. Because what happened next carries the energy that brought you here today. The following morning she woke up with unusual clarity. Not complete clarity. But enough. Enough to know indecision could not continue forever. Enough to know neutrality was becoming impossible. Enough to know that sooner or later a choice would have to be made. The universe often places people at crossroads. This was hers. Remain uncertain. Or decide. Remain passive. Or act. Remain silent. Or acknowledge what had become obvious. And somewhere between sunrise and sunset, the answer arrived. Quietly. Without fanfare. Without announcement. Without anyone realizing the importance of the moment. A decision formed. Not instantly. Not dramatically. But firmly. The kind of decision that settles deep within the soul before words are ever spoken. The kind of decision that changes future events before anyone notices the shift. The kind of decision that creates consequences far beyond the moment itself. And that is exactly what happened. The energy changed. The resistance softened. The perspective transformed. A new chapter quietly opened. Yet nobody around her understood what had occurred. Not even her child. Not completely. Because some decisions happen internally long before they appear externally. But heaven saw it. And heaven recognized its significance. My beloved child, this is where the story becomes even more extraordinary. Because the decision itself was not the end. The decision triggered something else. Something unexpected. Something she never anticipated. Once her heart reached a conclusion, new information began appearing. Almost immediately. Conversations emerged. Observations intensified. Insights arrived. Connections became visible. It was as if a veil had lifted. And what she saw left a deeper impression than anything before. There were details she had overlooked. Signals she had dismissed. Moments she had underestimated. Now they stood before her clearly. And each discovery reinforced the choice she had made. Yet one particular realization affected her more than all the others combined. This realization came during a conversation she never intended to have. A conversation that started casually. A conversation that should have been ordinary. A conversation that unexpectedly revealed something profound. When the truth surfaced, silence followed. Not because nobody had words. Because everyone suddenly understood the weight of what had been revealed. She listened carefully. Very carefully. And the more she listened, the stronger her conviction became. By the end of that conversation, there was no returning to old assumptions. No returning to previous doubts. No returning to former perspectives. Something had changed permanently. And still, the biggest revelation had not yet arrived. That revelation is connected to why you are reading this right now. Because while she was making her decision, another process was unfolding behind the scenes. A process involving timing. A process involving destiny. A process involving doors that had not yet opened. You have felt delays. You have felt uncertainty. You have wondered whether movement was ever coming. You have questioned signs. Questioned silence. Questioned outcomes. But what you could not see was how many pieces were still arranging themselves. This decision was one of those pieces. A crucial one. A necessary one. A piece that needed to fall into place before other events could proceed. And now it has. Yet something remains unfinished. One final element. One final conversation. One final realization. One final truth that has not fully surfaced. Because after making her decision, she discovered something that shook her even more deeply. Something connected to you. Something connected to her child. Something connected to a future she never imagined. When she first encountered this revelation, she refused to believe it. Then she questioned it. Then she examined it. Then she tested it. And eventually, she could no longer deny it. The realization was too strong. Too clear. Too consistent. Too undeniable. But what she understood in that moment is not something I will reveal yet. Not here. Not now. Because that discovery is the very thing that transformed an important decision into a life-changing one. And before that truth can be understood, you must first see what happened immediately afterward. Because the moment she accepted what she had learned, she did something nobody expected. something private, something symbolic, something that carried far more meaning than anyone around her realized. It lasted only a few moments. Yet the spiritual significance was enormous. The gesture seemed small, but heaven recognized it instantly. And when that gesture was made, unseen energies began moving in ways that neither she nor her child could fully comprehend. The chain reaction had begun. The story entered a new phase. And the consequences are still unfolding. What happened next is the reason this message found you today. What happened next explains why certain emotions have been intensifying. What happened next explains why strange signs keep appearing around this connection. What happened next explains why the future feels closer than it did before. But the full truth cannot be revealed until the next part. Because the decision your soulmate's mother made was only the first shock. The reason she made it. The secret realization that changed everything. And the unexpected action she took afterward. Those revelations are waiting just beyond this moment. And when they emerge, nothing in this story will look the same again.